get going. I think some of the commissioners will be along, but it's 6 minutes after noon. So, thanks everyone for being here. And before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that this is Jim Holland's last meeting with us today. So, Jim, just want to say thank you for all of your work for the county. And, we really appreciate you, and we're going to miss you. So, thank you so much for all that you have done. So, let's give this one. Okay.
But you're going to enjoy your vacation long term, right?
Definitely.
Is there anything on the agenda for tonight that you wanted to cover or review? Any questions?
Is there anything, anything on the agenda, anything not on the agenda that folks would like to talk about? No? All right, well,
Yeah, we'll add that at the end of open discussion. So we'll talk about Ferry Road discussion.
okay, sounds good. All right. I think we're going to start off with the aging allocation summary plan, and actually Stoney's going to tee us off on that.
Good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon.
Well, before you have the recommended allocation plan for state fiscal year 20 for our aging services, and Ronnie, you're probably familiar with this. Every year we sign this agreement, and it's really two things before you. One is our plan to designate Land of Sky as our aging administrator for these block grant funds. So someone has to be named. These are federal funds that come through the state down to the county. We could administer them ourselves. We have traditionally contracted with Land of Sky to administer those funds for us. And we also allow the process to administer our county funds that we put into aging. So one of the documents is naming them as the administrator of the funds on behalf of Buncombe County. And then the other, I guess, really important thing is the actual allocation plan for the commissioners to approve. And just so you know, there's actually a community committee that reviews all the applications for these funds that sits through our aging consortium. Aging coordinator consortium. The second C always gets me. And that's made up of a staff member as well as community members. A lot of folks on that aging allocation committee that are retired from local government. So it's a really good group. So this is their proposed use of the funds. And you can see sort of on this what we did last year, what we're doing this year, even breaks it down between federal funds, county funds. And so I just present it today to you guys, see if you have any questions.
So Stoney, we're going to actually bring it up on the screen for you.
I'm sorry.
That is on the agenda for tonight. We didn't preview, so all the way down under new business. New business, all the way.
There it is. It's still kind of smallish, but I'm going to make that larger. I do. Okay.
Do you have
Any questions? I'm not hearing any.
So the only thing on here was there was a $10,000 reduction, I think, from the federal government. That's the only difference in this than it was from last year.
Right.
We're maintaining our funding on a flat level.
Exactly. So the total funding would be flat.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
All right, Nate, I think you're up next with the rezoning items.
Josh Freeman's actually going to present those.
All right, hey Josh, how are you?
All right, I have 3 rezoning applications for you today. Start with case number 22, which is the applicants are Robert and Laurie Herka. This is one that staff is recommending denial of. The proposal is to take the current zoning from residential low density, which is kind of a 1 acre minimum lot size, very rural scale zoning district, to R1 residential, which doesn't really increase the allowable density too much. The minimum lot size goes from 43,560 square feet down to 30,000 square feet. The big difference is that it does allow a variety of different other development forms that RLD does not, such as planned unit developments, which allows for more clustering, and it's typically what you see when we're reviewing apartment complexes or more kind of multifamily type projects. Although I can't say that that's what the applicant intends, it does allow a broader range of residential and kind of soft scale institutional type uses. Basis of staff's recommendation is compliance with the comprehensive land use plan. Over half of the property is a steep slope, high elevation. Elevations above 2,500 feet. Also, over half of the property is on landslide-prone soils. So the comprehensive plan recommends that more dense residential development steer away from those areas. So our recommendation is based very plainly on the recommendations of your comprehensive plan.
I'm sorry, which one are you starting with?
I started with number 22, Herca.
Okay,
Sorry.
thanks. That's not, they're listed in a different order. So
Oh, are they? Okay, my apologies. I just
looked
flowed by my
like it
numerical
really
order here.
doesn't look like
So
that.
I apologize for
Looks
that.
pretty flat. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's fairly steep ground, and it's some pretty high elevation topography. So that's the basis of staff's recommendations. Questions on that one?
And this is the one that staff is denying,
Recommended denial.
recommending against,
Yeah.
yeah.
Don't see any questions.
Okay, moving on to case number 23, which is the Carolyn Johnson Advanced Properties North Carolina LLC application. It's located off Rutherford Road, just maybe a quarter of a mile north of US Highway 70. It's kind of out 70.
Hey, I have a question. So I'm
Yes.
sorry, on the last one,
Yes.
so you're saying, you could do like PUD type projects. This on the steep slope property, but it doesn't allow a lot more density.
No. No.
So if there were going to be something built there, would the PUD idea like allow people to kind of concentrate a little bit more? I mean, in some ways, is that not maybe an appealing idea on a property that you don't want to see, the whole thing
Right.
covered?
Potentially it could, and I should have actually mentioned this, but that is definitely an option, and it would make it easier to develop in a more sensitive way on those steeper slopes. The problem is they don't have direct access to water and sewer and allocation. It's not too far from water and sewer, but there's not been any dialogue between the applicant and MSD or City of Asheville on utility access, and without utilities, there's really no effective way to cluster in a way that would make a difference on the steep slope area. With water and sewer, and with a slightly different rezoning boundary, we might actually have a different position on it.
But would the property owner go to the trouble of getting water and sewer? Because they might only do that if they were going to use kind of a more
Right.
kind of compact development concept,
Right.
right? Instead of just spreading out and using a
It's
different.
certainly an option.
Yeah.
And if they had submitted me information that indicated some sort of dialogue there, then that might have changed both the planning board and staff's perspective. But you still run into the issue of the underlying land use policy, and without some really good supporting documentation to lead to a deviation from that, or recommendation is allowed.
So when you look at how tight those concentric circles are,
Yeah,
It's pretty steep.
it's very steep.
pretty steep.
I think you said is only half of it covered by steep slopes.
Well,
Looks like the whole thing's
yeah, almost, well, more than half of it. Yeah, I was generalizing. So there,
Okay.
that's half of it is high elevation. Actually, almost the entire property is
steep slopes.
steep slope, 25%.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's helpful.
35% is our regulatory threshold, and over half of it's in that as well.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thanks, Dave. Okay, number 23, the request of Johansson. Number 23 is to rezone the subject property from R3 residential to CS commercial. I'm gonna wait.
To the right, to the right, to the right.
I was doing Johansson Jacks, so I got out of order. Yeah, I wasn't attention to the agenda. So, there you go. Yeah, so that's a good view of the subject property. And, the request is to rezone it from R3 residential to commercial. Very dramatic change in potential land use, going from a mixed multifamily scaled, relatively high density residential zoning district to almost purely commercial as well as industrial type land uses. Staff recommends approval of this. It meets all of your criteria under the comprehensive plan for proximity to transportation corridors, proximity to utilities. The topography is pretty well flat. The only hesitation would be two things. One, it is abutting a residential neighborhood surrounded on two sides, north, east, by residential. It doesn't actually conflict with the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan talks about protecting low density residential neighborhoods, so sort of RLD and R1 type zoning. R3 is higher density multifamily, and there's no guidance from your policy that would steer you away from approving a rezoning. Probably the bigger concern from staff's perspective would be Rutherford Road. It is very heavily used by commercial traffic today. It's essentially kind of a commercial industrial service road for the businesses south and to some extent north of Rutherford Road. It is a relatively small, narrow road, but it's DOT. And so based on the preponderance of policy support, we recommend approval. But if I had any concerns, it would really be the Rutherford Road configuration of geometry. Any questions on that one? All right, we'll move on to the first one, which is Henning. This applicant is Brenda Henning, Henning Rental Properties LLC. The request is to go from R3 residential to neighborhood service residential. Scroll down and show you the current zoning. So as you can see here, it's very solidly embedded in the corner of a large residential R3 zoning district. It abuts neighborhood service here. This is, I believe, EMP. So most of the uses to the north and the west are commercial. The property in its current use is actually commercial. This predates zoning. These properties go back to the 70s and 80s in terms of their commercial development format. The property owner, I believe, is about selling the property, and she's wanting to change the zoning. It is supported by your comprehensive plan. Staff does recommend approval. Neighborhood service is our lowest intensity mixed-use commercial district. It does allow high-density residential as well. So it's kind of the next logical step up from residential to a non-residential zoning district. This is also an area that when we do begin the comprehensive plan, staff will be looking at more of a wholesale reconfiguration of zoning in this area. I think the current zoning map, not that you always want to zone based on what's there today, you obviously want to zone based on your long-term policy, but this is an area where a lot of commercial development makes sense, but the current zoning is somewhat of a hodgepodge of residential and various scales of commercial. In a different scenario, if the surrounding zoning were more heavily commercial services or EMP zoning, I would actually recommend a higher classification of commercial zoning, but to avoid spot zoning, maintain compliance with this case law and general statutes, we'd recommend neighborhood service.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, Josh.
Yep.
All right, y'all. The next few items are not on your agenda for this board meeting, but are more what's called previews of things that are in the future. So we're going to start off talking about the TDA and the Tourism Management Investment Plan. You've got a document in your packet. It's 2 pages stapled. Top right, it says Oakland County Government TMIP County Project Summary. So at this point, I just want to walk you through kind of some of the work that staff has been doing. That way, when you're aware of it in your travels, but also to give you an opportunity to provide input. So if you're not familiar, the Tourism Management and Investment Plan, or TMIP is the acronym, is TDA's attempt at creating sort of a long-term plan for tourism assets in Buncombe County. For years, the TPDF, the Tourism Product Development Fund, has been a one-year cycle. And so the crew at TDA really wants to look at a 5, 10-year, 15-year vision. That way they're focusing on longer-term projects that benefit the whole county. So in Section 8, the TMIP is defined as a 4-phase project. It's intended to be a community exercise, so there's lots of folks from across the county that are participating across different sectors. When the county was made aware of this, in Section B, our immediate response with April's leadership was to establish an internal county working group. And so you can see here on the left our Buncombe County staff that have been participating. I've got a few of those folks in the audience today. So Amanda Stratton, Performance Management, Nate Pennington, Planning, and Josh O'Connor for Recreation. In addition, though, we've been working Jim Bland at libraries, some of our folks that spend more time in the rural parts of the county, David Brigman, Steve Duckett, Gary Higgins as well, and of course myself. From there, our internal team, we sort of convene working sessions to say, hey, what are some of the gaps in the county from a tourism perspective? What are projects that we think could, quote, provide, quote, heads and beds, but also serve as community assets that benefit the county? In doing so, we decided it was time to talk to our municipalities. So we engaged these municipalities in discussion. So we've met with Black Mountain, Pine Tree, Woodfin, Weaverville, Biltmore Forest to talk about projects in their pipeline that had sort of a tourism lean, but also assess, their big ideas. Is there something they'd really love to be able to do if they had a little bit more funding? We've not directly engaged with the city of Asheville because we talk to them a lot and they're really at the table in all of these discussions. Any questions on our team? So, based on this, after meeting with the municipalities, it became pretty clear that, each of the municipalities has their own kind of culture, their own dynamics, their own draw to tourism. And so what we sort of identified was the need to sort of connect these different projects in a way that's more Buncombe County specific. So our quote unquote concept and vision statement, which is very draft, this isn't final stuff, would be to enhance and diversify tourism in Buncombe County through the circulation of tourists to our unique, eclectic, and vibrant community destinations. Our existing assets provide cultural, environmental, and recreational attractions while leveraging the charm of existing infrastructure found in Western North Carolina towns. So just kind of emphasizing that we already have these towns that have their draws, are very different from the city of Asheville. Not to downplay the value of the city of Asheville, of course, but a family may have a different interest in Black Mountain than they may in the city of Asheville, South Slope, for instance. So with that said, in the discussions, there were, in Section D, a few core projects that were identified. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, just want to give you kind of a quick synopsis and show you how they fit together. Also want to stress to y'all and to anyone in the room, including our friends in the media, these are conceptual for discussion purposes. These haven't been approved by boards of aldermen or anything like that. It's more a planning exercise. So starting with the town of Black Mountain, there's a number of projects that could connect the town of Black Mountain with the city of Montreat, town of Montreat. As you know, the town of Montreat, has a convention center. They also have a number of trails that are currently, not highly publicized, but could be used by many people. If we were to connect greenways from the town of Montreat to Black Mountain's greenways, that would be less than a quarter mile of greenway, would in theory allow you to walk or bike, whatever you wanted to do from Black Mountain proper, down Black Mountain, into the Montreat trails and vice versa. And so to us, that seemed like a pretty quick win project potentially that could, circulate tourism, really use existing assets without building something new. In addition, we spent some time at Weaverville. Weaverville just recently approved the creation of a community center that's going to be on Lake Louise. That falls into the Greenway Master Plan as well as Weaverville's own walking trails. So in theory, you can walk from Lake Louise and the community center, which has pickleball courts and all sorts of other stuff, again to downtown Weaverville. Again, another opportunity to create kind of a tourist hub potentially. In Woodfin, there's a lot of good things going on. Most notably, you've probably heard of the Woodfin Wave, which is a TDA funded project right there on the river. There's some thoughts about creating soccer fields on old landfills that would be tournament quality. Uh, that's,
On the
a,
old Woodfin landfill?
that's right. Josh is here. He can chime in when I get off track. But, you know, there's no designated use for the old landfill at this point. But I believe it has been tested. It's not in a floodplain. It would address kind of a long-standing gap for us with soccer fields in the county. Would also fall on the existing greenway infrastructure, and also, interestingly enough, the Craggy Mountain line. So I've not actually been on the Craggy Mountain line, but I know some folks have. It's existing railway line that connects basically Reynolds Park to the river. So again, another destination, and maybe not the only reason people come to Buncombe County, but maybe a reason to stay one more night or something of that nature. Last idea on this topic that I'm going to focus on.
Is that the old landfill that's on Elk Mountain Road, or just off of Elk Mountain Road? That's that site?
Yeah.
Okay.
Currently used, I think they've been doing some kind of technology uses some of that space as a test.
And again, very preliminary ideas, but if we're building a tourism CIP, you got to start with all the ideas and then whittle them down, filter them, prioritize them. Last idea here that I'll focus on is the old Incan Site, so in Swannanoa. This space, 45 acres, has recently gone under contract, and the contract is closed. There's an aspiration there to construct a large recreational facility that will have something like 12 full court basketball courts, potentially some type of sports medicine component. It is on the old Beacon site, which burned down in 2008. There's been a number of environmental tests that have occurred there, and it's good for development, just not residential. So again, another example of the project. As I'm scrolling through, so now you're on page 2, section E. There are a ton of other ideas that were thrown out there. I will clearly not walk you through this list, but ideas ranging from heritage trails that travel across our farms, to museums, to replacements at the Cellular Center, Thomas Wolfe, just to name a few. Section F, a few other themes identified. So in our discussions with municipalities, they were pretty clear that they felt like they would benefit from some support from the TDA or whoever as it relates to marketing, advertising, what's the brand for Black Mountain as an example. In addition, additional wayfinding tools, as well as virtual wayfinding. So if you're from out of town and you're looking to get around Buncombe County, what's the app on your phone pull up to do that? And I think the answer to that might be you don't know. And so that's another example. Final item here, and then we'll move on unless you have questions. So we asked our communications department to help us piece this together in a way. So they gave us this graphic, again, very conceptual, but it shows you how these different areas and municipalities with their plans might fit together. So, Weaverville here at the top, Black Mountain on the right. What's interesting about this is a lot of these projects are connected by our existing Greenway Master Plan or other plans for trails. So the Fauna Flora Trail as an example. Clearly, that there's not greenways connecting all these pieces, but it's just another way of showing kind of how these projects are connected. And so if we're talking about circulating tourism throughout Buncombe County so that everyone's reaping the benefits, the cost potentially, this is one way to do it.
Do you have cost estimates for the projects that are more near term?
Some we do, but certainly not a definitive list. We met with the TDA's consultant. Their name is PGAB. And so we gave them all our ideas, all our information. What we would expect is a meeting in 2 months to sort of see what caught their eye, what seems like a room night generator, what seems like a community benefit, and then spend time prioritizing those projects and looking at cost and things like that. Do y'all have any? Go ahead.
Questions? Feedback?
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
This is really helpful, thank you. Has there been any sort of more high-level dialogue about a strategy wherein some TDA funds could be used for infrastructure and core services that are really essential to maintaining the community, and a lot of the kind of attractions that are designated as tourist attractions. I know there's been community level discussion about that. I'm just wondering if it's showing up in this process, and if not, if there's a way that we can sort of put that question on the table. Just, I mean, some of it I think is very basic concrete stuff like accessible sidewalks in downtown Asheville, for instance. Or I know there's been conversations at the level of like, spikes in needs related to EMS services when we see some bigger events in town that kind of end up being absorbed largely by the communities. So I don't know, I'd just be interested in whether A, that conversation is underway already as part of the strategic sort of analysis, or B, whether there's an opportunity to bring those questions to the table.
Sure. I think definitely an opportunity. I know that that conversation is occurring. We tend to run into the same, kind of, I don't want to call it a roadblock, but there's a statute that says here's how the funding is sort of spent. So that tends to be, 75% goes to advertising, 25% to the product development fund, which is really a bricks and mortar kind of focus. So that's always been historical response.
Yeah, I know that context. It seems like an interesting opportunity to kind of, it's just, I mean, tourism brings a lot into this community. It also brings wear and tear and pressure on services. So I just think, I certainly, if there's opportunities, would be interested in having a more robust conversation about that.
Definitely.
So thank you for the
Absolutely.
presentation.
So if it was, I mean, if you can tie it to the legislation, with infrastructure projects, then as long as the projects need to be infrastructure, and there needs to be some evidence that it will increase tourist visitation, right?
Sure.
So as long as you meet those two criteria, it's allowed. But if you don't meet those two criteria, then it would require a change to the legislation.
That's right.
But is that, so I guess following up on Jasmine's question, is there any discussion about that? I mean, is that sort of part of the conversation at all of, hey, let's as a community kind of step back, think about how to use the resources as best we can, and if there are some ideas that that people think are good ideas but wouldn't fit with the legislation. I mean, is that part of the conversation, or is it more predicated on these are the rules?
Sure.
Now let's have a conversation about what would work well within the policy framework that exists.
As part of the process, TDA has set up a community leadership council, CLC. They met, I believe, last Wednesday. It was a 2 to 3 hour session. I know there was a lot of time spent on this topic, specifically infrastructure needs in the city of Asheville. I think the mayor focused on that a good bit. So I think that is a venue. On that leadership council should be elected representatives from the county, but also municipalities, as well as staffers. So I know the managers were invited as well. So that's a place for it.
But a concern I have, has anybody looked at just the legislation? Because when you talk about 75-25, well, nobody thought back in the 80s when this was put in place that we would have 25 million or more a year coming in.
Right.
Well, they're not going to spend that much on advertising. We already advertise all over the world now, wherever you go. But, I think we need to look at bringing that legislation up to date and what's needed here in Asheville. Because when you look, in Buncombe County, because when you look at the number of hotels we have, and motels, and the stress that they're putting on the infrastructure in Asheville and Buncombe County, we need to revisit that.
So we did talk about this at the commission, but I believe it was before before any of you were here.
Yeah.
So I guess it was just before y'all, a lot of y'all showed up. So we did, when they did the last increase from 4% to 6%, the questions that Al's talking about were definitely of a lot of interest. And so they came up with that. So it's not going as far back in the future as you might think, because this was just about 3 or 4 years ago, when the legislation was passed to increase it from 4% to 6%. And that formula of 75%, 25% was in the updated legislation. And the commission voted 4-3 because we had to approve it for it
Absolutely.
to go into effect, and it barely passed for the very reason that you're talking about. So a lot of commissioners and I think community members wanted it to be a higher percentage of available for infrastructure.
Should be.
But so it's not that far back in the future
That's not-
that those issues
Yeah.
we're talking about. But even since then, the amount of funding that's coming in is
It's
just
just going
grown
through.
incredibly. So,
Yeah.
well, I guess my thoughts on this. I mean, I think we should try to demonstrate or kind of identify all the infrastructure projects that we really think would be good. I mean, and if there's way more infrastructure projects than the funds are available to build, then in a way, maybe kind of fighting the fight of trying to talk about changing it isn't maybe that compelling because we need the money just for the infrastructure projects. But if there starts to be other, because I think about other things like the festivals, these other things that are not bricks and mortar projects, but which are valuable to the community. They're good for tourism, and and I know they're trying to do some things to put some more resources behind that. But I wonder if we had some more flexibility, there'd be some other really good ideas I think that could be considered as well. And I'm sorry I couldn't go to that TDA meeting. I was traveling for work last week, but we should. I'm glad y'all are. I'm glad we're engaged in this. There's a lot of resources at stake here. My just kind of initial sense is that these are good projects within municipalities. They don't. I mean, maybe other than the Beacon project, they don't seem like really big ticket items, right? So I want to make sure we come up with enough specific ideas to put forward. There'll be a lot of great projects in Asheville. I'm sure there'll be very strong advocates for those projects, and we'll all like a lot of those. But we need to kind of think big, right? There's a lot of resources here. So, I mean, our other some of the greenway projects that are in the unincorporated areas. I mean, those are really up to us to kind of program, right? Because there's not a municipal leader.
That's right.
To kind of partner with on those. So, how much are those kind of being looked at? I
Definitely.
mean, I know we've got we're already got a lot of planning going on, but are we investing enough in other planning resources to kind of come up with cost estimates and feasibility and
Right.
things like that for other projects that we might want to?
Right. And I think you brought up a good point. Some of these smaller projects on their own, aren't a draw, but if we can combine them into kind of a destination or a place, that's also connected to a greenway, then we kind of do what we did in Anko, which is combine a few assets together to make a bigger project that's more friendly to tourism and tourism calculators, but also gives us community assets in the process.
The one other comment I have on this would be, a lot of where we've been successful is definitely when there's partnerships. The county puts in money, TDA puts in money, maybe DOT, or there's some transportation money. So I don't want to not say we shouldn't, have skin in the game, but just considering the amount of resources that are flowing into the TDA kind of funds now. And one of the other things I would just advocate for some of these projects, like I think about the Swannanoa arena, the Beacon project. It seems like a great project. That's a project where it is so. I mean, there'll be some local benefits, but it is really a tourism project, and I would have a really hard time supporting putting a lot of our general fund, our scarce general fund dollars into a project like that. But I really would love to see something like that happen. So, I think part of the conversation should just be the hope that TDA will kind of take more of the lead on the funding for these projects that really are tourism projects, so that the local government units can kind of focus on providing services and infrastructure that only we can do. So, not to say we don't put something in, but just that I think that the mix of funding, I hope might maybe be a little bit different in the future, just considering how much their resources, how quickly they have increased by such a large amount. Any other feedback from commissioners or questions? All right, Tim, thanks. What's
So
next?
before we move on, one of the things that the steering committee could do for TDA would look at that funding formula, because there's a match that a local government does. So when we get to that committee meeting, maybe that one thing we can talk about is what would that match look like to minimize general fund impact. Because right now, we would have our general fund match the way it stands today. But since they're open for the conversation, maybe when we at the table, we can help to guide that conversation so that we can minimize our general fund contribution.
I think that's great.
Sure.
So,
Good deal. Anything else? Did I miss anything, y'all?
All right.
So we're going to shift gears slightly. We're going to talk about economic development. There's a slide on the screen, should be in your packet as well. Catch here is, again, we're giving you kind of a preview of sort of what we want to talk to you about in the future. So, this is a listing of all of our projects that are currently active or were active in FY18. And quickly, I'll walk you through some topics. So, total incentive here listed, the paid amount cumulatively, the proposed investment, those jobs, and a status as to where they are related to jobs and investment. So, on schedule, off schedule, kind of thing. What we'd like to do this year, we've not done this with y'all before, is provide kind of this update of all our projects. So an economic development year in review, if you will. So these numbers, again, this is looking at the end of FY18. I haven't updated these to reflect FY19 because we're still going through that process. But this will be a way for the board to reflect on the incentives you've put into economic development projects and sort of what you're getting for it in terms of jobs as well as capital investment. Something we would add to this slide would be average wage, that we have understanding of the types of jobs that are created, but also glad to provide any additional context that I would like to see. Joining me in that conversation will be EDC, so Clark Duncan will join me to provide kind of an update on their work. You funded them at about $350,000 for the past few years. And, there's a lot of work that they do, but they're not limited to just recruiting big companies. There's a number of programs we'd like to share with y'all. One example being Venture Asheville, which is their small business incubator. Next AVL, which is a program that helps local college students find mentors in the area so that they don't leave the area. Just programs like that. So that's something coming in the future. You'll see that in probably the second meeting in August. We wanted to give you a heads up, let you know this is something we're looking at. So,
All right.
any questions or comments?
is there anything else you want to see coming in from economic development?
I'm curious, we see what the proposed jobs are. We have another column that says actually where they are. We know they're on schedule. What does that mean in terms of numbers?
Definitely.
Thanks.
We can give you actuals. Anything else you would like to see? Any concerns, questions?
I think so.
All right. Last topic for me. We're going to shift gears once again and talk about strategic planning. All right, so once again, you have this document in your packet. Title is FY20 Strategic Planning. I know that Avril has talked to you all about this, but she asked us just to give a brief update on where we're at. And, again, this is a project where we've been working collaboratively. Avril providing leadership, Eric Hardy, performance management involved, Rachel Nygaard as well. But plan to involve many more department heads and, of course, the board in that process as well. So in this document, we'll provide a quick overview on strategic planning. From there, we will talk about the proposed timeline, and then finally next steps. So in terms of strategic planning, clearly we need a facilitator. The facilitator that we'll be using is Rebecca Ryan. Some of you are familiar with her through her work with the Chamber of Commerce. But Rebecca's got 20 years of experience. She's worked for the cities of Beaufort, Tacoma, and Des Moines. She's also supported the Chambers of Commerce from Buncombe County, Charleston, and Chattanooga. And she's currently works with the Institutes of Government for the University of North Carolina as well as Wisconsin. So she's got sort of the local government think tank experience there as well. Rebecca in our community has been here for about the past year working on the AVL Grader project, which is something I believe you've heard of, but something where we'll provide an update in the near future, asking the Chamber to come update on that. But what this is, it's a planning exercise for our community. Industries have been included, as well as community partners from local governments, education, nonprofits as well. And the way that work is focused, it's looked at, quantifiable trends in our community, changing demographics, increased sectors, sustainability concerns. There's a number of different specific hard topics with numbers. And the question is, are you prepared for this trend? Are you doing anything related to this trend? Does this trend even matter? And so that's kind of been how that's been presented. But, Rebecca, because she's already been working in our community, we thought she was a good fit. And because she's been working in the community, she didn't have to ramp up as much to know some of the players. So what has been currently discussed is Rebecca would like to start with one-on-one phone calls with each of you. These phone calls will be 30 minutes, just you and her, to talk about a number of topics, really anything you want to talk about, but specifically feedback on current strategic priorities, strategic plans, your vision for how you see the board governing, your vision for evolving priorities, if there are any, just anything you'd like to discuss that's on your mind related to strategic planning in Buncombe County. Out of those one-on-one phone calls, there would be workshops. Right now, we're talking about 2 4-hour workshops. And in those workshops, again, we're going to talk about trends that are impacting Buncombe County, such as a changing economy, affordable housing, an assessment of whether those trends are addressed through existing priorities or projects, plans, etc. And then some discussion about vision and values, as well as anything that kind of comes to mind. Within that, we haven't had a chance to socialize this yet because we wanted to talk to y'all about it first, but would also want to incorporate feedback from department heads. So during the 2-day workshop, we would focus on y'all initially, bring department heads in for their own session to hear what you kind of discussed, and then have a closeout session with y'all, just to synthesize all of it. Are there any questions on the approach? I know this is the first time I've seen this.
I think it sounds good. When would the workshops be held approximately?
Get to the point,
Okay,
Tim.
right down there.
Yeah, it is.
July.
Yeah.
30th and 31st.
Yep. So the workshops themselves would be July 30th and 31st. We're recommending this date because our new assistant county managers will both be on site as well. So we think it would be good for them to partake if possible. And then our window for doing the phone calls is the 15th through the 24th. We got a lot of flexibility there. Just wanted to kind of narrow it down for y'all a little bit. So those are the tentative dates. We haven't nailed them down, but wanted to nail them down with y'all today if possible. So I guess I would start with the workshops and ask, are there any major concerns about the 30th and 31st?
July 30th, so it's Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm good. Anybody got any conflicts?
No bad. We'll be back.
Do you guys have any preference for morning sessions or afternoon, just 4-hour blocks? So we can do 8 to 12, or we can do 1 till 5, whatever, 10 till
I'd vote for afternoon if we have an option.
afternoon.
Is that good?
Morning's better, but
Morning's
neither
better.
is good with me.
All right, thank you.
Good. So we'll work on the dates, nail them down, make sure your calendars are booked. Again, we're approaching this in 4-hour blocks, so you'll have one on the 30th and one on the 31st. And, there may be additional discussion after July, but just short term.
And I know this is the kind of thing we'll get into when we do this kind of strategic planning process. But just one thing I would just kind of throw out is, one of the biggest things that's changing in Buncombe County is the creation of the Dogwood Fund, right? So it's gonna be like the biggest charitable fund per capita in the country, right? We'll now be here in Buncombe County. We've traditionally been a community that doesn't really have a really strong philanthropic, kind of community because we're not a big kind of corporate, town like Charlotte or Raleigh or places like that. So, so there's gonna be a lot of resources there. They're going to be all about kind of preventive, health. So doing proactive things to kind of create a healthier community. which is really in a lot of ways what the county is kind of about, right? That's what our missions kind of align a lot. We talk about the TDA having a lot of money, like these people really have a lot of money. So in some ways I kind of feel like part of our, and they'll have all kinds of partnerships across Western North Carolina. It's not just about Buncombe County, but in some ways I think we're kind of uniquely positioned to create some of the plans that could be then, invested in. So I think we, I don't know. I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, they'll make the decision about how to program it, but if we come up with good strategies and vehicles, then I think there's just going to be enormous opportunities to partner there. So how we think about that, how we staff that, how we kind of put the work into kind of creating good and effective plans will be something that we need to think through, because the upfront work is work too. So anyway, I'll just throw that out as a lot of the things that we see here are trends that are important, but they've been going a long time. We're still, they're the things we wrestle with, but this is a big different thing. So
I'm glad you brought that up. And just quickly to build on that, I mean, I think 3 of the strategic priorities we've identified sort of very directly link into social determinants of health, with early child education, affordable housing, and responding to the opioid crisis. And I think in each case, the county's leveraging fairly sizable investments of public dollars. And I'd be excited to have an even more focused conversation with them about partnerships, particularly in those 3 areas. And we're certainly seeing in some communities like Charlotte that have the corporate foothold. I think like corporate entities in Charlotte just pledged $6 million towards early child education. That's part of sort of a package of about $30 million that's now going towards the issue in Mecklenburg County.
Right.
And I think those are the kind of exciting configurations where you start to get public and private dollars flow, or foundation dollars flowing. So I would be excited to have a pretty focused conversation with them as soon as they're ready to have that about those 3 areas that we know are so key in our community.
Because when they start giving the first grants, I think in early or late 20, it's no excuse for us not to be standing in line, hopefully at the head of the line, because we need to prepare for it. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of the organizations in the community are not doing. Because when you go to those big foundations, it's not like the Jan Earths we had here that was just small, $30 million compared to what they'll be getting more than that over a year. But I agree with Brownie. We need to prepare for it and take advantage of it.
all right, Tim. Thanks. Thanks for the heads up. How this is moving ahead.
So the open discussion, Commissioner, I want to start off and then I'll turn it over to you again. But I wanted to come back with you with Ferry Road. We talked about this at our last meeting, and I'll ask Mike Frew to talk about an item we want to add to the agenda. So we do need for you guys to add by consensus an agenda item tonight on Ferry Road.
Okay.
Yeah, my apologies. I just overlooked putting a placeholder on the agenda for this item. It has been a moving target, as mentioned a couple weeks ago, for the current deadline to close with the inspection period is Saturday, June 22nd. We got a request a few weeks ago to extend that deadline by another 120 days. We haven't had a lot of communication back and forth, primarily because their attorney's been out of town on vacation. He's back in town, had a good conversation with him this morning, and the traffic engineer. And I think they are working hard to get the approvals they need. I mean, there's some concern over the dragging their feet. I don't get that sense at all. Just generally speaking, I mean, we are trying to work our way through a negotiation for a second modification. Don't want to get into the details of that here because we're still working on that. But on site, we met Thursday, and Nate, correct me if I'm wrong, or Commissioner Presley was there as well. We met on site with a bunch of DOT officials and the traffic engineer. And it is a difficult access site for this kind of development. If you're in, Chairman Newman was there as well. So, I mean, if 191 is down here, that's got 5 lanes. There's a stoplight up this way, a stoplight up this way. So the issues are, does the DOT approve making Dry Ferry Road a one-way road to direct traffic, to give 2 options, left and right? Would that one-way road require a stoplight? There's other alternatives. Well, 2-way, what kind of improvements to that infrastructure would be required? And would DOT commit to put in a stoplight for that? So So that's where they're having trouble with their drafting of plans and getting approvals, and it just takes time. So we think 4 months would be enough, but I would say give them 6. I mean, if that's necessary through negotiation, just in case, because there will be other asks and other approvals they need to get before they go forward.
Okay.
And so the item on the agenda this evening would be simply to formally accept their offer they made some months back, so that we can close the loop for this end of this due diligence period and proceed forward without coming back to the board.
So we just need to accept the offer that they.
It's a formal acceptance
Okay.
of the offer they made.
We've sort of informally told them we.
And we published
like
the
it.
required
Yeah.
advertisement for upset bid, accept the bid, and we're following the statute. This is just to close that loop.
Okay, that sounds easy.
During this process, will they continue to pay us the 10,000 a month?
That's what we're talking about.
Okay.
But we won't. But that's still being kind of negotiated a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, that sounds. Robert.
Yeah, is it 4 months or 6 months you're,
They asked for 120 days.
I think they need 6, don't you?
I sort of think so.
I mean, with what I learned the other day there, it's 60 days away from the DOT even making a decision of what, for them to get there.
Yeah, from talking to the traffic engineer, I get the impression that from the DOT side, this could last another 10 days or 6 months. But, you know, there's still other things to get cleared up.
I think it's likely they will. Part of me kind of feels like I'd prefer to just give 4 months, and then if they need some more time, you know, we can talk about it. Because if you give them 6 months, they're going to take 6 months, right? So, but I do think realistically they very well may need that much time. So I'd love to create some incentives for closing sooner if possible.
Well, we had a frank discussion this morning, said you're gonna fish with that bait, so they're trying hard. They're not ready to run away, because they think they'll get it. They're very hopeful and positive.
Well, I thought the meeting with DOT was very positive, and the planning staff, thanks for everyone being there. I mean, I think there are some very practical solutions that should work well. There's a couple different ideas that sound like they're likely doable. So I came away from it pretty encouraged. I mean, they seem like they really want to do this project. It's just a matter of kind of choosing which of these transportation solutions is the best one. So, Robert, what are you giving comments?
Yeah, follow up, I talked to Joe with, the Benchmark Auto Sale, and he is very supportive of them if they can close the other road down, of giving land swap just a little bit for the north end to come out on the lower end of the bicycle shop there. And he said he would be all for that, of closing the bridge off. I know DOT wanted the bridge. They never even knew the bridge existed the way they talked.
Well, they want it to be closed, right? Yeah, because it's very outdated. road.
So I think,
I did some title work. I mean, that's old Brevard Road. I mean, that's back when horse and buggy days, and they were literally in the middle of nowhere to get to Brevard. So there's not a lot of room there. So there's some improvements that need to be made.
It should probably get a historic designation and be closed down, right? All right.
So I do want to agree, just that he can add this to the agenda tonight.
We'll have to,
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
I
we
think
missed
the
it.
5 of us are saying
Yes.
yes, so
Okay.
we'll revisit with the 7
I
of
ran
us
into
this
Commissioner
evening.
Fryer in the hall, mentioned it to him and said,
Sounds good.
6.
Sounds good. All right. Anything else? All right. Any other items people want to check in on before we adjourn? All right. Thanks.
Right?